Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Bankrupt Hippo YouTube channel. I'm Bryce, and this is a game review for The Evil Within. Ladies and gentlemen, if you like what you're seeing, feel free to like, comment, or subscribe to the channel. I sure do appreciate it. Let's now get right into the review. Evil Within brings together interesting elements that have the recipe to create a game that treads areas that most would avoid. However, the game gets in its own way by combining these elements in a manner that make the story difficult to follow and make for clunky gameplay. The Evil Within follows the story of Sebastian Castellanos, a Crimson City police detective who gets a call to a gruesome scene at a mental hospital. He arrives to a deeply gruesome, harrowing scene that begs many questions. From there, Sebastian descends on a journey into madness as he discovers who or what is causing these events. Throughout the story, the game makes a strong attempt at making the audience feel that they are losing their minds along with Sebastian. However, the landing doesn't quite stick. There are many cutscenes that start off in what we perceive as real time, but then are quickly interrupted with flashbacks and visions, which cause Sebastian to transport into a whole new place on a dime. This is a tactic that is familiar from psychological horror films, and was really interesting to see in a game. However, these moments were too plentiful and not far enough in between to where I got lost in the game's story early on. Because of that, I found myself caring very little about most of the game's characters, aside from Sebastian, who we get little glimpses about as the game goes on. Sebastian's past is the most interesting part of the game's story. As we journey through the game, we read journal entries that outline significant moments in his past and what lead to this point in his life. Even this redeeming quality is stifled, as we don't get much payoff aside from what we read in the journal entries. It feels like what we read in his journal and what we play in the game are two completely separate entities that never come together and make me question why the journal was created at all. With a story that is mostly lackluster, the gameplay proves to chalk up to about that same standard. The gameplay mechanics felt like they were designed to punish players for using their resources. Mainly, this feeling came from the use of a weapon wheel to draw weapons and craft ammo. There were dozens, if not hundreds of times, where I would be chased by multiple enemies and needed to quickly select a different weapon and start firing. However, the combination of sprinting and opening the weapon wheel made for a difficult sequence of controls that made the combination of the two feel impossible. If I was sprinting and needed to change weapons, I'd pretty much have to stop dead in my tracks to open the weapon wheel and select my new weapon, which enabled enemies to inevitably catch me. On the flip side, I could keep running, but then I would have no way to defend myself should I run into a dead end or run out of stamina. There were no valuable trade-offs for either, and it made for extremely frustrating interactions with enemies that felt impossible. To make matters even worse, opening the weapon wheel did not stop time. If I chose to open my weapon wheel while running from an enemy, it would make them slow down, but they wouldn't stop. Hypothetically, I could be in the middle of selecting a new weapon and an enemy could still attack me in the process. Unfortunately, the game doesn't stop there, as running out of stamina can cause your controls to shut off for several seconds while Sebastian catches his breath, which leaves you defenseless. This is taken even further with some medical supplies, where their application will also shut off your controls for several seconds while they take effect. The extent of this made the game feel like it was punishing you for using your resources, which gives the player less power in the way they play the game and thus dampens the overall experience. I can appreciate the attempt at realistic gameplay, but again, the combination of these elements just made combat a displeasure. While the gameplay was largely frustrating, the execution of the power-up system was a unique aspect that I enjoyed. In-game, you could collect green gel from defeated enemies, which could be used for upgrades to Sebastian's abilities, weapons, and healing. The application of this green gel was in the form of sitting in a menacing chair that fit the vibe of what the game was going for, which was being in an insane asylum. It was a nice touch to the experience that landed nicely with the game's tone, without getting too far overboard. However, I found that the green gel was pretty hard to come by, and I was only able to max out 3 or 4 of my abilities by the end of the game. There were over 20 different abilities that you could upgrade, so it made me feel like I missed out on a lot. The psychological horror space is something that is more often pursued in film rather than games, and I commend The Evil Within for its ambition in attempting to do so. However, the game's ambitions fall short, as its gameplay mechanics were some of the most frustrating I've ever seen in games. Unfortunately, they could not be saved by the other qualities that the game provides. The story feels the same way, as its execution feels disjointed with too many diversions off course and little payoff to show for its most interesting points. There's joy to be found in this game, but I can't help but feel that it's simply unfulfilled potential. What did you think of The Evil Within? Comment below, and we'll see you next time.